Hi, how you doing and welcome back to the video on the channel. What we have for you today is our wildcard video going into Game Week 28. If you are new to the channel, please do like and subscribe. The support has been awesome all season and we are a small channel trying to grow, so if you can help with that, it would be appreciated. We're going to start with this video looking at general teams to target, and then we're going to delve into specific players from each team, which if you are wildcarding at the moment could hopefully help you out. So let's take a look at the teams to target, and as we get them on the screen, we're going to kind of talk about the obvious blank in Game Week 29. And for me, it depends on what you're going to use your chips for. So if you're wildcarding now, you could either forget about the blank in 29 and use your free hit chip for that game week. Or if you're wildcarding now, you could maybe get a mixture of players in and then just try to make the most of Game Week 29. I think for me, if I was wildcarding this game week, I would probably just forget about the blank and obviously try and get in a couple of players from teams that are playing. You know, you do want about 7-8 players in that game week. But the upside for this blank game week isn't really that high. I think using something like your free hit chip could really be more valuable for double game weeks in the future. So I wouldn't base your team around one single blank game week. And I also wouldn't necessarily use your chip on this game week either. I'd just do your best to try and accommodate players from those teams in your wildcard who also will benefit you mid to long term. So we do have a mixture of teams here. We've got teams that are in form, like Villa and Arsenal. We also have teams who have a double game week, like Bournemouth, and teams who sort of have a blank in 29 and teams that don't have a blank as well. I think for teams that are in form, like Arsenal and Aston Villa, they're almost fixture proof with their form. You know, they're teams that are going to be near the top of the league. They have good fixtures, but even if they didn't, like Villa's is a little bit mixed, there are still one or two players you would want from those teams. I think the same can be said for teams like Spurs and Wolves. Like Wolves, they have good fixtures. They do have a blank in that game week, but there's not necessarily, you're not going to get 3 players from Wolves. It's just a good option to maybe get 1 or 2 Wolves players who might sit on your bench some weeks, might come in and play in other weeks. So let's take a look at the team here, and we're going to start with the goalkeepers. And I've gone with Areola and Kelleher. I think for me, Kelleher is someone who could quite easily be your starting goalkeeper if you wanted to save funds elsewhere. I think he balances quite well with Areola, who is doing really well this season as a starting keeper for West Ham. You know, West Ham have had a bit of mixed results of late, but they do tend to sort of even it out and will probably finish about 6th, 7th, 8th, that sort of area. And at 4.2 million to have a starting goalkeeper in that space, I think is really good value. The first defender we're going to talk about is Doty. Now, he is someone who is obviously in here for the double game week. Now, both his games are away, but he is a really high assisting defender. I believe he's in the top 3 for defenders with assists so far this season. I think it is worth wildcarding this week, and if you are doing so, you do want to kind of try and make the most of the double fixtures. Speaking of which, we're going to talk about Bournemouth now. Now, Senesi and Solanke are really good options. I think if, you know, let's say there is an injury or we're not too sure about, say, Senesi before the deadline, he's very easy to move off for another Bournemouth defender. I think the fact that they play both their fixtures at home in Game Week 28 really stands out, and Solanke is someone who has already got 14 goals this season. I think he's someone who's definitely going to add to that tally, and I can see him scoring 20 goals overall, if not more, which means there's goals to be had. Now, as a double game week, I don't think it becomes any easier than the Luton at home and Sheffield United at home. So not only should you get Solanke in, he's a real captaincy option for this next game week. I've also gone with double Arsenal here. Now, double Arsenal seems to be the sort of the thing for the wildcard teams this season, but they are near the top of the league, and Saka and Gabriel do also play, you know, really well consistently. You know, Saka is so consistent this season, and even when he does have a bit of a dry spell, he comes back with a bang and is now in a really rich vein of form to the point where people are thinking of captaining him over players like Haaland and you know, Son and Salah and the usual players that you can get in your teams, the big hitters. Gabriel is someone who's also a threat from set pieces. We talk about him most weeks, but Arsenal's defence is one of the best in the league. I think they are top for clean sheets in the whole league, and that is something which cannot be ignored, especially when you're playing, you know, the teams that they are playing at the moment. They're quite a nice fixture run that they've got coming up. Double Aston Villa. Now, Douglas Luiz is someone who's a fantastic price point at 5.6 million. I think Ollie Watkins speaks for himself. He's got the most attacking returns out of anyone this season, and I would absolutely just get him in. He is someone who, again, as we said at the start of the video, is fixture proof because his form is that good. He is the focal point of everything Aston Villa do from an attacking point of view, whether that is goals or assist. Now, I've put Son in here as well. This is really because I think Spurs are dealing with one or two injuries. We're not too sure about Richarlison, so Son is now going to play through the middle for the foreseeable future. He is someone who was in great form before he went away on international competition. He's kind of come back in bits and pieces, playing the odd bit of games here and there. Now he looks like he's back for 90 minutes. I think if you believe that he's going to recap the form that he had before the international competitions, I think he's absolutely worth the money. He's not super premium. He is in that sort of Saka range, but he is cheap enough to allow you to not commit all your funds there and spread your money elsewhere. And it really does allow you to balance out your attack quite well with your strikers. So having talked about Luiz being really good value, I think Cole Palmer is the same. Now, I know Chelsea are mixed as a team, but for me, Cole Palmer is someone who has returned so consistently. He's almost averaging a return in his every game, the last 10 games, I believe. So he's someone who I think you have to get in, mainly just for the price point. I think you will struggle to find someone who is better value than Cole Palmer. We're rounding out the starting 11 with Haaland. He's now 14.5 million, which is the most expensive he's been all season. I think even though Man City have, they're not playing that well. We're actually recording this video whilst they're 1-0 down to Man United. But he's someone who you need in your team no matter what. He's always going to get chances, and we're not overcommitting to Man City players here. You might think, we'd have more Man City players in the team given their historical form towards the end of the season. But for me, I think because they're sort of, going in bits and pieces for their run at the moment, I think form isn't great. Haaland is just exactly what you need and no more. I think it's more valuable to spread out the money elsewhere and get in players such as Watkins, Solanke, who are big focal points for their teams. You could also look at Saka, Palmer and Son as well. It is worth noting that we do have 7 out of the top 8 scorers in the Premier League in this team as well at the moment. So I think that's really something that's worth noting. The bench is obviously including Bowen, who is one of those 7 players. I think for me, your bench at the moment, it depends if you want to use your free hit or not. Like we said at the start of the video, it's worth not using your free hit just yet, based purely on upside. So for me, Bowen is someone who went out of form, now could be back in form as well. And we spoke about Wolves fixtures coming up. I think Kilman is a great price point defender for someone who, could get the odd clean sheet, has also been known for the occasional attacking return as well. So overall, when I put this into Fantasy Football Hub's team rate, a shout out to them, it did come up with 89%, which is definitely one of the lower percentages for teams as it stands. I think that's largely based on the fact that a lot of players do blank in Game Week 29 in this team. But I think it does leave us with, 1 or 2 transfers away from getting 8-9 players out in your team for Game Week 29. And the overall value is 99.3 million, so it does leave you with a bit of value to use. Maybe you didn't want to have players that are blanking in 29, and you could therefore use that extra money to swap them for someone who is quite easily. Bear in mind, if you've got a playing bench as well, you can easily just sub in 1 or 2 players for that one game week. They get a couple of points and then you sub them out again. And I think as well, a lot of these players, if you've had them in for a while, you will be saving team value in there as well. All these players are their current prices, so I think if you were getting them in from scratch, your team value for the squad would look a lot different than it would do otherwise. So for me, the strengths are it sets up quite well for the double. We've got some key players for Bournemouth and Luton there, and lots of these players are in form. We talked about how, including Bowen, you've got 7 top goal scorers out of the top 8 players in the Premier League in this squad at the moment. So they're clearly contributing consistently across the season. I think the weaknesses we've talked about, lots of blank Game Week 28 players, and it does use your wild card. I think there are opportunities. I think it's Game Week 31 and 34 where there are, reasonable risks for using your wild card at this point, where there could be higher upside later on. I think also using it after the blank Game Week 29 is really valuable as well. I think you could, dead end your team into game week 29 and sort of really focus on players from those teams. And then if you don't want those players long term, just transfer them out on your wildcard. But it really depends on how your season is going. So let me know whether you're thinking of using your wildcard this game week. Have you got a plan for chip strategy, or are you just sort of waiting and seeing for a bit more information with the doubles? Please do like and subscribe. The support is really appreciated. Hopefully you're having a great game week as well, and I will see you in the next one.